My name is Thessaly Whitmore and I am 62 years old. I worked as a librarian for 38 years at the Multnomah County Library in Portland, Oregon, before I retired 3 years ago. I lived in the same rent-controlled apartment in the Hawthorne district for 24 years. It was a small one-bedroom with hardwood floors, a bay window overlooking the street, and shelves I built myself to hold my book collection. The rent was locked at $850 a month thanks to Portland's rental protection laws. My landlord, Wendell Thatcher, hated that. He bought the building 5 years ago and immediately started pushing out longtime tenants so he could renovate and charge market rates. Market rate for my apartment was over $2,000. I was costing him money just by existing. But I knew my rights. I paid on time every month, kept the place immaculate, never caused problems. Wendell could not touch me legally. So he tried other methods. Harassment, mostly, unnecessary inspections, complaints about noise I never made, threats disguised as friendly advice. In March, my father Corbett died in Tampa, Florida. He was 89 and had been declining for months. My sister called me at 4 in the morning to tell me he had passed peacefully in his sleep. I booked a flight for that same day. Before I left, I went to Wendell's office in the building next door. He managed 6 properties in the neighborhood from a cramped office that smelled like cigarettes and old coffee. I need to let you know I will be gone for a week, I told him. My father died. I am flying to Florida for the funeral. Wendell barely looked up from his computer. He was a heavy man in his 50s with thinning hair and permanent sweat stains under his arms. Sorry for your loss. Rent is still due on the 1st. I paid early this month, I reminded him. I always pay early. He grunted. I left, feeling uneasy but not knowing why. I should have trusted that instinct. I should have taken photos of everything in my apartment, documented the condition, made copies of my lease. But I was grieving and exhausted. I just wanted to get to Florida. The funeral was on Friday. It was a small service, just family and a few of my father's friends from the retirement community. We buried him next to my mother, who had died 12 years earlier. I stayed an extra few days to help my sister sort through Dad's belongings and close his accounts. It was painful work, dismantling a life piece by piece. On Wednesday, exactly 1 week after I left Portland, I flew home. I took a rideshare from the airport to my apartment building. It was early evening, the sun setting behind the West Hills. I climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor where my apartment was located, number 2C. My key would not fit in the lock. I tried again, thinking maybe I was just tired and not turning it correctly. But no, something was wrong. The lock itself looked different, newer. I stepped back and really looked at my door. There was a notice taped to it. A bright orange piece of paper with bold black letters. Notice of eviction. Property reclaimed for non-payment of rent. My hands started shaking as I read it. Non-payment? I had paid March rent 3 weeks early, before I left for Florida. I always paid early. I had bank statements proving it. This made no sense. I pulled out my phone and called Wendell. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. Wendell, this is Thessaly Whitmore in 2C. I just got home and I am locked out of my apartment. There is an eviction notice on my door claiming non-payment, but I paid rent on March 10th. Call me back immediately. I hung up and tried the door again, uselessly. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs. A young couple appeared, mid-20s, carrying boxes. They walked right up to my door. Excuse me, the woman said. Are you the previous tenant? Previous tenant? I am the current tenant, I said, my voice tight. There has been some mistake. The man shook his head. No mistake. We signed a lease for this unit 3 days ago. We are moving in tonight. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. That is impossible. This is my apartment. I have lived here for 24 years. The woman looked uncomfortable. Look, we do not want trouble. We went through a property management company. Everything was legal. The landlord said the previous tenant had been evicted for non-payment. I paid my rent. My voice came out louder than I intended. I have proof. The man put his hand on his girlfriend's shoulder. We are going to call the landlord and the police if you do not leave. We have a legal right to be here. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break down that door and prove this was my home. But I was 62 years old, exhausted from travel and grief, and facing 2 people who genuinely believed they had done nothing wrong. I took a shaky breath. Fine, but this is not over. You are living in a stolen apartment. I turned and walked down the stairs before I started crying in front of them. On the sidewalk, I called my best friend Bertie Carmichael. She had been my colleague at the library for 15 years before she retired. "Bertie, I need help. Something terrible has happened." She picked me up 20 minutes later. I told her everything while sitting in her car outside my building, watching those strangers carry boxes into my home. Bertie was a fierce, practical woman in her 60s with short gray hair and no tolerance for injustice. "That is illegal," she said flatly. "You cannot evict someone without proper notice and a court order, especially not while they are out of town burying their father. This man just committed a felony. What do I do?" I asked. "We get you a lawyer. Tonight." Bertie drove me to her house in Selwood and made me tea while she searched online for tenant rights attorneys. She found Devereaux Sterling, a lawyer who specialized in illegal evictions and landlord abuse. Bertie called her office and somehow convinced the answering service to patch us through to Devereaux's personal cell. Devereaux listened to my story and said immediately, "Do not try to enter the apartment. Do not confront the landlord physically. Meet me at my office tomorrow morning at 8. Bring every document you have related to your tenancy. Lease agreements, rent receipts, bank statements, emails, everything." I slept on Bertie's couch that night, or tried to. Mostly I stared at the ceiling, thinking about my books, my clothes, my photos of my parents, everything I owned sitting in that apartment with strangers walking over it. The next morning, Bertie drove me to Devereaux's office in downtown Portland. Devereaux was a sharp-eyed woman in her mid-40s with dark hair pulled into a tight bun. She wore a gray suit and radiated competence. I spread out everything I had brought on her conference table. My original lease from 24 years ago, renewal documents, rent receipts going back years, bank statements showing automatic payments including the March payment I made before leaving town. Devereaux reviewed everything methodically. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases of illegal eviction I have seen in my career," she said. "Oregon law requires a minimum of 30 days written notice for eviction, even for non-payment, which you clearly do not qualify for anyway. Additionally, a landlord cannot lock out a tenant without a court order. What Wendell Thatcher did is called a self-help eviction, and it is absolutely illegal." "What happens to my things?" I asked. "My entire life is in that apartment." Devereaux's expression hardened. "We are going to get your apartment back and we are going to make sure Wendell Thatcher faces consequences. But first, I need you to tell me everything about his behavior over the past 5 years." I told her about the harassment. The monthly inspections where Wendell would find imaginary problems and threaten to evict me for lease violations that did not exist. The time he claimed I was subletting because my nephew crew stayed with me for a week when he was between apartments. The noise complaints he filed against me even though I lived alone and barely made a sound. The certified letters demanding rent increases that violated rent control laws, which I refused to pay. The intimidation tactics, standing too close, raising his voice, implying that elderly women like me should not be living alone in valuable real estate. Devereaux took notes the entire time. "Has he done this to other tenants?" "Yes," I said. "There were 8 rent-controlled tenants when he bought the building. Now there are only 2. Everyone else was pushed out through harassment or illegal rent increases. The woman below me, Mrs. Chen, is 83. Wendell has been trying to force her out for 3 years." Devereaux nodded. "This is a pattern of behavior. That strengthens our case significantly. Now, I need to know, did you document any of this harassment?" I felt my face grow hot. I did. I kept detailed records, dates, times, photos, copies of his illegal notices. Everything. "Where are those records?" Devereaux asked. I closed my eyes. "In my apartment, in a manila envelope in my desk drawer." Devereaux sighed. "Then they are probably gone. Wendell would have cleared out your belongings by now." But I shook my head. "No, not that envelope. I moved it somewhere safer 2 weeks before my father died." I had a feeling Wendell was escalating. I was planning to file a complaint with the Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industries, but then Dad got sick and I had to leave town. Devereaux leaned forward. "Where did you put the envelope, Thessaly?" I taped it to the underside of the bottom drawer of my kitchen cabinet. "The cabinet that is built into the wall. You would have to remove the drawer completely to see it." A slow smile spread across Devereaux's face. "And the new tenants would have no reason to do that." "No," I agreed. "And neither would Wendell. He did not know that envelope existed." Devereaux stood up. "We are going to file an emergency motion today for immediate restoration of possession. With your documentation of rent payment and the obvious illegal eviction, I can get a court order within 72 hours. When we get you back in that apartment, that envelope will be waiting." Devereaux worked fast. She filed the emergency motion that afternoon. We had a hearing scheduled for Friday morning in front of Judge Honor Ashcroft. In the meantime, she sent a legal demand letter to Wendell requiring him to preserve all of my belongings and cease any further rental activity related to my apartment. Wendell responded through his own lawyer, a man named Gregory Bass who specialized in defending slumlords. His response claimed I had abandoned the property after failing to pay rent, and that Wendell had acted within his rights. It was a lie built on lies. The hearing was intense. Wendell showed up in a cheap suit, sweating and nervous. His lawyer tried to argue that I had failed to provide proper notice of my absence and had defaulted on rent. Devereaux destroyed that argument in under 5 minutes. She presented my bank records showing the March rent payment. She presented my email to Wendell informing him of my father's death and my travel plans. She presented Oregon rental law statutes that clearly outlined the eviction process, none of which Wendell had followed. Judge Ashcroft was not amused. "Mr. Thatcher, did you obtain a court order before locking Ms. Whitmore out of her apartment?" Wendell stammered, "Your Honor, she had not paid rent. I had a right to reclaim my property. That is not what I asked. Did you obtain a court order?" "No, but then you violated Oregon law." Judge Ashcroft turned to his lawyer. "Mr. Bass, I suggest you advise your client to stop talking." She reviewed the documents in front of her, then delivered her ruling. "I am granting the emergency motion. Thessaly Whitmore is to be immediately restored to possession of apartment 2C. The current occupants have 24 hours to vacate. Mr. Thatcher, you are ordered to return all of Ms. Whitmore's belongings in the condition they were in prior to the illegal eviction. Additionally, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges related to illegal eviction and fraud." Wendell went pale. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. Judge Ashcroft was not finished. "Ms. Whitmore, you are also granted leave to file a civil suit for damages." Court is adjourned. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in days. Devereaux squeezed my shoulder. "We won the first battle. Now comes the war." 24 hours later, I stood outside my apartment with Devereaux, Bertie, and a police officer who was there to ensure compliance with the court order. The young couple who had moved in looked devastated. They had been scammed too, paying first and last month's rent plus a deposit to Wendell for an apartment he had no legal right to rent out. Devereaux told them they could sue Wendell for their money back. They left with their boxes, shooting angry looks at Wendell, who stood in the hallway glowering. "Keys," the police officer said to Wendell. He handed over a new set of keys. I unlocked my door and stepped inside. The apartment looked strange. My furniture was still there, but things had been moved. My books were stacked haphazardly. My personal items were shoved into corners. It looked like Wendell had gone through everything, probably searching for anything he could use against me. But he had not found what mattered. I walked straight to the kitchen, opened the cabinet under the sink, and pulled out the bottom drawer completely. Taped to the underside, exactly where I left it, was a large manila envelope. I peeled it free and held it up. "Got it." Devereaux took the envelope from me with the reverence of someone handling evidence in a murder trial. We sat at my dining table and she opened it carefully. Inside were 3 years of documentation. Photos of building code violations. The electrical panel in the basement with exposed wiring. The fire escape with rusted bolts that would not hold weight. The black mold in Mrs. Chen's bathroom that Wendell refused to remediate. Copies of illegal rent increase notices Wendell had sent to multiple tenants, demanding amounts that violated Portland's rent control laws. A spreadsheet I had created tracking every tenant who had lived in the building over the past 5 years, when they moved out, and whether it was voluntary. Out of 12 departures, only 2 had been voluntary. Screenshots of Craigslist ads where Wendell had listed rent-controlled apartments at market rate while the legal tenants were still living in them, trying to force them out through intimidation. Emails where Wendell had threatened me and other tenants with eviction for complaining about building maintenance. And a timeline I had constructed showing Wendell's systematic plan to empty the building of rent-controlled tenants so he could renovate and flip it for profit. Devereaux read through everything with increasing intensity. When she finished, she looked up at me. "Thessaly, this is not just evidence of illegal eviction. This is evidence of fraud, criminal harassment, building code violations, and conspiracy to commit housing discrimination. This envelope is worth potentially millions in damages and could put Wendell Thatcher in prison." "Good," I said quietly. "He has been terrorizing elderly tenants for years. Someone needed to stop him." Devereaux made several phone calls. First to the Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industries. then to the Portland building inspector's office, then to a contact she had at the district attorney's office. Within hours, multiple investigations were launched. Building Inspector Pace Kellerman showed up at the property the next morning with a team. They spent 6 hours documenting violations, faulty wiring, inadequate fire safety measures, plumbing issues, structural problems Wendell had hidden with cosmetic renovations. By the end of the day, Pace handed Wendell a citation requiring immediate repairs totaling over $80,000. If the repairs were not made within 60 days, the building would be condemned. Wendell stood in the hallway reading the citation, his face purple with rage. He looked at me. "You did this." "No," I said calmly. "You did this. I just documented it." He took a step toward me. The building inspector immediately stepped between us. "Mr. Thatcher, I suggest you focus on hiring contractors instead of harassing tenants. Unless you want additional charges filed." Wendell stormed off, but he was not done. 2 days later, I received a letter from his lawyer threatening to sue me for defamation and destruction of his business. Devereaux laughed when she read it. "Empty threats. He has no case, but we do." She filed a civil lawsuit on my behalf. The charges were extensive: illegal eviction, wrongful possession of property, fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, violation of Oregon tenant protection laws, and violation of the implied warranty of habitability. We were suing for $200,000 in damages. But Devereaux did not stop there. She contacted every tenant who had been forced out of Wendell's buildings over the past 5 years. 14 people. She offered to represent them as a class action lawsuit. 12 agreed. Suddenly Wendell was facing not one lawsuit but a massive class action representing years of systematic abuse. The local news picked up the story. Elderly librarian exposes landlord's illegal eviction scheme. I gave an interview standing in front of my building. "I am not special," I told the reporter. "I am just someone who paid attention and kept records. Wendell Thatcher has been exploiting vulnerable people for years, and he thought he could get away with it because his victims were old, poor, or did not know their rights. But we have rights, and we are fighting back." The story went viral locally. Other tenants from other buildings Wendell managed started coming forward with their own stories. The district attorney's office announced they were filing criminal charges: 3 counts of criminal fraud, 5 counts of illegal eviction, and multiple building code violations that constituted reckless endangerment. Wendell hired an expensive defense attorney, but the evidence was overwhelming. My envelope had started an avalanche. In July, 4 months after my illegal eviction, Wendell's wife Sloan filed for divorce. According to court documents that became public, she claimed she had no knowledge of his illegal activities and was protecting her own assets. She was lying. I had emails proving she had helped him draft illegal eviction notices. Devereaux added her to the lawsuit. By August, Wendell was drowning. The criminal trial was scheduled for October. The civil lawsuit was moving forward. The building repairs were incomplete and the city was threatening condemnation. He could not rent the apartments because of the ongoing investigations. In September, Wendell's lawyer approached Devereaux with a settlement offer. He would pay me $50,000, admit no wrongdoing, and I would drop the lawsuit. Devereaux presented the offer to me in her office. "What do you think?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, this is not about money. This is about justice. He needs to face consequences." Devereaux smiled. "I was hoping you would say that." We rejected the settlement. The civil trial began in early November. It lasted 2 weeks. I testified about the illegal eviction, about coming home from my father's funeral to find my life stolen. Other tenants testified about harassment, threats, and illegal rent increases. Building Inspector Pace Kellerman testified about the dangerous conditions he found. A forensic accountant testified about Wendell's financial scheme, showing he had illegally collected over $400,000 in fraudulent rent over 5 years. Wendell's defense was pathetic. He claimed he was just trying to run a business, that tenants were too sensitive, that building codes were too strict. The jury was not sympathetic. After 4 hours of deliberation, they returned a verdict: guilty on all counts in the civil trial. The jury awarded our class action group $1.8 million in damages. My personal share was $300,000. But the civil trial was just the beginning. The criminal trial started 2 weeks later. I sat in the courtroom every single day and watched Wendell squirm under the prosecutor's questions. Detective Huxley Ramson, who had led the criminal investigation, presented evidence of Wendell's systematic fraud. Bank records showing he had pocketed security deposits and never returned them. Emails where he coordinated with his wife to falsify eviction notices. Testimony from contractors who said Wendell had ordered them to hide building violations rather than fix them. The defense tried to paint Wendell as a small businessman overwhelmed by regulations. But the prosecution showed he owned 6 buildings worth over $4 million. This was not a struggling landlord. This was a predator. The criminal jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the forewoman read the verdict. Guilty on 3 counts of fraud. Guilty on 5 counts of illegal eviction. Guilty on 2 counts of reckless endangerment related to the building code violations. Judge Ashcroft, the same judge who had ruled on my emergency motion, handled the sentencing. She did not hold back. Mr. Thatcher, you exploited the most vulnerable members of our community. You stole from elderly people on fixed incomes. You endangered lives with your negligence. You violated the trust inherent in the landlord-tenant relationship. This court sentences you to 4 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation. You are ordered to pay full restitution to all victims, totaling $1.8 million. Additionally, you are permanently barred from owning or managing rental property in the state of Oregon. Wendell collapsed into his chair. His expensive lawyer immediately began talking about appeals. But Judge Ashcroft was not finished. Mrs. Sloan Thatcher, please stand. Sloan, who had been sitting in the back of the courtroom, stood shakily. You are charged as an accomplice to fraud. While your husband orchestrated these crimes, you actively participated in creating false documents and threatening tenants. You are sentenced to 18 months in prison and 3 years probation. Sloan started crying. I felt nothing watching them. No satisfaction, no anger, just a quiet sense that justice had finally caught up with people who thought they were untouchable. After the sentencing, Devereaux and I stood on the courthouse steps. Reporters surrounded us. How do you feel? One asked. I thought about my father's funeral, about coming home to a locked door, about the envelope that had changed everything. I feel like the system worked, I said. Not quickly, not easily, but it worked. And I hope this sends a message to other landlords who think they can exploit people. It is December now. I am still in my apartment, the one I have lived in for 24 years. My rent is still $850. The building has new ownership after Wendell's properties were seized and sold to pay restitution. The new owner is a nonprofit that specializes in affordable housing. They have fixed all the code violations and treat tenants with respect. Mrs. Chen is still downstairs. We have coffee together every Sunday morning and talk about how we survived Wendell Thatcher. The $300,000 I received in the settlement has been put into a trust to help other tenants facing illegal evictions. Devereaux helps me manage it. We have already helped 8 families fight back against predatory landlords. My nephew Crew, who helped me organize evidence, is in law school now. He wants to specialize in tenant rights. I could not be prouder. People ask me sometimes how I had the courage to fight back. The truth is, I did not feel courageous. I felt angry. I felt violated. But most of all, I felt like I owed it to every elderly person who had been pushed out of their home by someone like Wendell. That envelope saved my life. The evidence inside brought down a criminal and protected countless future tenants. But the real power was not in the envelope. It was in the choice to document injustice when I saw it, to speak up when I was wronged, and to fight even when the system felt overwhelming. Wendell Thatcher is in prison. I am home, and that is all the justice I need. So that's my story, a journey that started with an illegal eviction and ended with a landlord behind bars where he belongs. I'm 63 now. I still live in apartment 2C, the same place I've called home for 25 years. My rent is still $850 a month. The building has new owners who actually care about their tenants. Mrs. Chen downstairs is thriving. We have coffee every Sunday and remind each other that we survived. Wendell Thatcher is in the 2nd year of his 4-year prison sentence. His wife Sloan served her time and was released last month. They lost everything, their properties, their money, their reputation. The buildings they owned are now managed by a nonprofit that provides affordable housing to people who actually need it. That $300,000 I was awarded? I put it into a legal defense fund for tenants facing illegal evictions. With Devereaux's help, we've already helped 23 families fight back against predatory landlords. My nephew Crew just finished his 1st year of law school specializing in tenant rights. This fight continues beyond me. But here's what I need you to understand. What happened to me was not unique. It happens every single day across this country. Elderly people, poor families, vulnerable individuals, pushed out of their homes by landlords who see them as obstacles to profit rather than human beings with rights. Wendell thought I was an easy target. A 62-year-old widow, grieving my father, alone and powerless. He thought he could steal my home while I was at my most vulnerable and I would be too scared or too tired to fight back. He was wrong. The envelope I hid saved me. But the real power wasn't in that envelope. It was in the decision I made 3 years earlier to start documenting the injustice I was seeing. Every illegal notice, every code violation, every threatening email, I saved it all. Because somewhere deep down, I knew a day would come when I'd need proof. That day came sooner and more brutally than I expected. But I was ready. So if you're watching this and you're dealing with a landlord who harasses you, who threatens you, who tries to intimidate you into leaving, document everything. Take photos, save emails, keep receipts, know your rights. Your city and state have tenant protection laws. Learn them, use them, and if you're being illegally evicted, if someone is trying to push you out of your home without following proper legal procedures, fight back. Find a tenant rights lawyer. Most will work on contingency, meaning they only get paid if you win. Contact legal aid organizations. Call your local news station. Make noise. Because here's the truth that landlords like Wendell don't want you to know. You have power. The law is on your side. They're counting on you being too afraid or too exhausted to use it. Don't give them that satisfaction. I was exhausted. I was grieving. I was scared. But I fought anyway. And I won. Wendell lost his freedom, his fortune, and his future. I kept my home. More importantly, I protected 12 other families from the same fate and created a system to help dozens more. That's not revenge. That's justice. And justice is something worth fighting for, no matter how tired you are. People ask me if I ever feel guilty about what happened to Wendell. If 4 years in prison was too harsh. If I could have just taken a settlement and moved on. My answer is always the same. Wendell Thatcher spent 5 years systematically terrorizing elderly people, stealing their money, endangering their lives with building code violations, and destroying their sense of safety and home. He did it knowingly, calculatedly, without conscience. 4 years is mercy. The system doesn't always work. I know that. I was lucky to find Devereaux. I was lucky that judge took my case seriously. I was lucky that envelope survived. But luck favors the prepared. I prepared by documenting everything. I prepared by knowing my rights. I prepared by refusing to be silent when I saw injustice. You can do the same. Your home matters. Your rights matter. Your dignity matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't let anyone make you feel like you deserve to be pushed out, pushed around, or pushed into silence. Stand up, document, fight back, win. Because somewhere right now, another landlord is looking at another vulnerable tenant and thinking they're an easy target. Prove them wrong. Be the person who says no. Be the person who keeps records. Be the person who fights. I'm just a retired librarian from Portland. I'm nobody special, but I changed the law in my city. I sent a criminal to prison. I protected vulnerable people. And I'm still here, in my home, drinking my morning coffee and looking out my bay window at the street I've loved for 25 years. If I can do it, so can you. Thank you for listening to my story. Know your rights. Document everything. And never, ever let anyone steal your home without a fight. The envelope I left behind destroyed a predator. The lesson I'm leaving you might save your life. Oregon has strengthened tenant protection laws since this case. Know your rights. For tenant legal help, contact your local legal aid office or visit the National Housing Law Project at nhlp.org. Now to the lovely viewers of this channel. Got a story? Let's tell it together. Here on this channel, your voice matters. If you have a personal story, a revenge moment, a betrayal twist, or even an idea that you think would make our narratives sharper, more emotional, or more entertaining, share it with us. Tell us what themes you want more of, what twists keep you hooked, what parts of our stories hit you the hardest, or what you'd love to hear next. Drop your thoughts, stories, and suggestions in the comments below. Let's build this amazing community together, one powerful story at a time. Your story could be the next one featured. Don't be shy, we're listening. And we would always respond. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more satisfying stories like this.